A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Straits Times and SkillsFuture Singapore Future of Work Forum. My name is Haryanto, and I'm from the Straits Times. Now, this event is organized by SkillsFuture Singapore and the Straits Times as media partner. Now, today's event, Upskilling for Long-Term Business Viability. Now, how can your business entity stay buoyant in a world awash with wave upon wave of transformational changes? Today, we have 4 speakers in the industry to give us sneak peeks into the future workplace and share with us some instrumental upskilling strategies for riding out the challenges and attaining sustainable growth for our businesses. Now, to kickstart today's event, we would like to invite our first speaker up on stage, Mr. Indra Neil, Future of Work Lead from Deloitte Southeast Asia, to give us valuable insights on the big picture of digital advancement and its disruptions. Mr. Roy, please.
Right, good morning. Have I lost you already? Good morning. Thank you. Appreciate that. So I'm Indra Neil. I get to hear my full name only when I'm in trouble with my wife. So I prefer Indro. So please refer to me as Indro. So I'm based here in Singapore. I've been in Singapore for 20 years. I'm Singaporean now. I'm originally from India. I oversee a program called the Future of Work program, which is Deloitte's biggest investment into looking at what the future will look like. And I'm delighted to be here today and to be making some opening comments, which will run for 10 minutes, and then we'll have a panel discussion later. The notion of the future of work is particularly interesting to me from 2 angles. So one as a professional. My background, my educational background is in robotics and psychology, which is quite interesting, because a lot of the work that I do right now is kind of in the realm of machines and human beings and how machines and human beings are going to work together in the future. But more importantly, the future of work is interesting to me as a father of a 16-year-old. And he was, we were having a conversation with him about careers, and he was keen on pursuing a career in law. And one of the first assignments that I took on as part of the Future of Work research was to understand which occupations are likely to get completely automated in the future. And the legal profession, especially the junior roles in the legal profession, we found about 95% of that could be automated with technology that exists right now. So I find myself, feeling quite inadequate in terms of being able to advise my son. And if you have children, I'm sure you know the feeling. So I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about the future of work. But every time I start off on this journey, every time I have a conversation with anybody, especially journalists, can you guess what is the first question that I get asked about this topic, about the future of work? Any guesses? Exactly. Are robots going to take away our jobs? So unfortunately, over the last several months and several quarters, we've had a massive amount of press highlighting kind of the doom and gloom scenario of automation taking away our jobs. And what we have found, and we have been doing this research for the last 7 years, and what we have found is that there is a good news story and a bad news story. So which one do you want to hear first? Bad news? All right, we're Singaporeans. We will go with the bad news first. So the bad news is that depending on which, it almost doesn't matter which study you look at. Almost all the studies that have been done by the Oxford University, by MIT, by us, by McKinsey, by several others, anywhere between 47% and 53% of the work that we do today can be automated in the next 2-3 years with technology that exists right now. Not technology that somebody is going to invent in the future, but technology that exists right now. So that is the bad news. So what is the good news? The good news is that if you look at occupations, and we went through occupation by occupation in the US database and the UK database. We're looking at the Singapore database right now, and what we find is the total number of occupations that will be completely automated, 100%, is almost zero. So that is the combination of those data points gives you a sense of the coming disruption that is going to be true for you in the work that you do, for your kids in the careers they pursue, and for all of us, which is that almost all of our jobs and roles will be dramatically changed, but we will not have a mass-scale replacement of occupations. We will have a mass-scale augmentation of occupations. And that's why the overall theme that we use to talk about the future of work is the augmented workforce. The technology theme is everywhere, right? And we have had so many instances of new technologies that almost sound like science fiction that is being put in front of us every day. I'll just give you a couple of data points. And this is the kind of curve that the technology growth is going on. And I'll just give you a couple of data points. By 2020, a $1,000 computer is going to roughly have the processing power of the average human brain. Just think of that for a second. By 2020, the average processing power of a $1,000 computer is going to be that of a human brain. By 2030, a $1,000 computer is going to have the average processing power of all human brains on the planet. So that is the speed, that is the exponential speed at which technology is evolving. But what is particularly interesting in this situation, which is unlike all of the disruptions that we have seen before, that have gone before us, is the focus on cognitive technology. Because this is not our grandfather's disruption. It's not our father's disruption. Because that disruption involved taking away physical labor in the form of robots, taking away or replacing physical labor or blue-collar jobs in the form of robots. The current movement is towards cognitive technologies. And the focus on building robots and AI applications and cognitive technologies that replace white-collar work. For instance, writing a report, figuring out some data and analyzing that data to come out with some insights, understanding what a particular trend would look like into the future, looking at huge sets of data to be able to take better decisions as a CEO or a CXO. So all of those things we have assumed are very much core part of the human role that we play in organizations. So this notion of cognitive technologies is what is particularly curious and particularly interesting right now. So we are in a very interesting venue for the arts. And one of the things that has been a challenge for any kind of technology has been to replicate original art. And I was listening to a BBC program about a month ago where a robot just designed the first, or developed the first original symphony orchestra piece, and it was quite nice. But what is fundamentally different about the human endeavor in the future is not about trying to figure out how can we get better than robots at analyzing things or writing reports or things like that. We did some research in terms of what we call essential human skills. And those essential human skills that are very, very difficult to get a robot to replicate are things like empathy, are things like communicating in difficult, high-conflict situations, about relating to people, relational skills, building relationships, about creative problem solving, not necessarily structured problem solving, but creative, open-ended problem solving. About prioritizing, what problems should we solve? What should we invest in? What would create greater well-being for human beings? Those are the kind of human skills that are going to be a premium in the future. And that's what brings me to the next point, that here's the good news part of the story. So if you look at technology, I've talked about the exponential move in technologies. But let me also bring your attention to the fact that as individuals, as consumers, we are quite good at keeping pace with technology. Raise your hand if you have a smartphone in your pocket. Just raise your hand. Keep your hand raised. Keep your hand raised if you actually had to look at a user manual to use your smartphone. So think about that for a second. The smartphone in your pocket packs more technology than the spaceship that went to the moon first. And if you think about that you did not need, and I don't think too many people in this room are PhDs in technology, but you did not need a user manual to adopt to that very, very complex technology. So as individuals, as consumers, we actually keep pace with technology really, really fast. It took my grandmother about half an hour tutorial with my son to start using Facebook, all right? Yeah, it's a complete disaster, but she has started using Facebook. So the fact that as consumers we adapt to technology very, very quickly is great. But you know, something happens, there is a problem that happens when our organizations try to do the same. So our businesses, business processes, organization structures, the hierarchies, they have a life of their own. And it's very, very difficult for organizations and businesses to keep pace with the change. Which is precisely why every time there's a change that is rolled out in your organization, it is not rolled out in a way that makes it easy for people to adopt. It is rolled out in a way that makes it very, very difficult. And finally, public policy takes a lot of time to catch up. So this is the picture that I want you to take away, that if we can make our businesses as adaptable and agile as we are as consumers, and if we can make our public policy as agile as we are as consumers, we'll be fine with this technology. And I want to finish with one thought, and that is the half-life of skills. So we've been looking at this concept of a half-life of a skill. So when I went to college, that was in the 1990s, early 1990s. The half-life of a skill that I studied in college was conceived to be about 25 to 30 years, which meant that I went in, got a college degree, and for 25, 30 years, I could use that skill and make a living. Can you guess what is that right now? What that time frame is right now? Any guesses? 5. It's between 4.5 to 5 years right now, and it's dropping. So as we send our children to college, we have to understand that in about 4.5, 5 years' time, their skills will become irrelevant. So the open question that we have is that how do we reskill an entire generation every 5 years or so, every 4 years or so? Who is going to pay for it? Are we going to pay for it as parents? God forbid. Are we going to pay for it as individuals? Are companies going to pay for it? Or is the government going to pay for it? How do we make it a way of life? How do we make lifelong learning a way of life? So that just like consumers, as we adopt a new technology, we are also able to build new skills and adopt to the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roy. Now, our next speaker, Ms. Stephanie Davies, Country Director from Google Asia Pacific, will share some of her perspective on tackling future challenges. Ms. Davies, please.
Indra is a kinder, more selfless person than I am. He's thinking about his 16-year-old son, and I'm thinking about myself and all of us in this room. But I hope to leave you with why I'm optimistic, just as you did for myself and for all of us. So thank you to my fellow panelists, to our friends at the Straits Time, SkillsFuture, and to all of you who made the time to be here this morning. My name is Stephanie. I look after our business here in Singapore. And I was asked to share with you this morning how Google views the future of work and how we're meeting some of those challenges in 10 minutes. This is a topic that we could discuss for hours. And the reason is it's quite meaty, right? There is an absolute global shift that is happening, one that Indra and my colleagues, of course, will be touching on. And it's happening because of the power of technology and the affordability of that technology for all of us. So there are a lot of changes that are happening, big changes and small changes. But the beauty of 10 minutes is that it is a forcing mechanism to maybe pull out the highlights and also give us all opportunity to hear multiple perspectives. So in my 10 minutes, I'm going to share with you 3 of the biggest trends that we see in the workplace, or that is at least happening in the landscape with businesses. Give you my quick thought on, is Singapore well positioned? Sneak peek, I think it is. And I'm going to do a rapid fire 5 things that Google is thinking about ourselves as a company to meet some of these challenges. So, the first, value is moving from producers to creators. And you may do a little bit like I did, scratch your head and think, what precisely does this mean? The global economy in the last century has been driven by production at scale. Think about the Industrial Revolution. Think about the rise of China. The winners have been those that have been able to produce, once again, at scale. But don't get me wrong, scale's not a bad thing. We're a company that operates and is rewarded at scale. But it's that particular piece on production. The advent of where technology sits today is allowing us to commoditize a bit of that production. And the value shift is moving from that to the intangibles, such as brand and intellectual property. And it's not just in the production of physical goods. Think about the movie industry as an example. We have a scenario whereby movies were and still are to some degree, but to a lesser degree, big budgets, bring in the best stars that you could, produce this film in the movie theaters, distribute to pay TV, and then to DVD. That distribution process has been largely commoditized due to technology and due to platforms like YouTube, hence the slide that you're looking at, whereby there is a platform out there where millions of individuals can have their voices heard. So you don't have to be this large movie studio anymore. You can be down in Bugis, producing and reaching millions of people. And that's precisely what Gillian Tan and our Click network right here in Singapore has accomplished. So you don't have to be this multinational conglomerate anymore. There's technology out there for people to be heard as individuals, small groups, and small companies. The second of the 3 that I would like to leave you with is that the internet, and specifically mobile, is absolutely changing how small to medium-sized businesses are working. So a small to medium-sized business doesn't have to think about its reach any longer being confined to a neighborhood or to a city. It doesn't have to think about the audience or their consumers or potential consumers or customers being in a particular physical vicinity. That is because technology has really knocked down boundaries. It has lowered cost. It allows SMEs to reach any number of people that could possibly be interested in their goods or services. So it has opened up big scale and scope opportunities. That I think we all know, but I'd like us to think about the flip side of that, and that is how technology is also driving ultimate localism. So think about the fact that Singaporeans spend 3 hours and 12 minutes on average every day on that mobile device that Indra just asked us about. So they're using a mobile device to ask, what is the best restaurant near me? Where can I shop for my favorite pair of jeans? In fact, we see more than 1/3 of our queries on Google having local intent. So it has allowed us to have bigger opportunity at scale, internationally even, but it's also driving hyper-localism through technology as well. And Deloitte also has research out there that when our local SMEs take advantage of digital tools, they produce more revenue and they also hire more people. So the third and final observation is yes, artificial intelligence is currently, and it will continue to augment human ability. This is our internal statement from our CEO, Sundar Pichai, who stated in 2016 that Google was going to move from a mobile-first company to an AI-first company. But as small to medium businesses, I know that that can seem intimidating. How do I react to this? But there are two things that I would like to leave you with on this particular point. And the first is there are a lot of companies out there, like Google, that are highly engaged in AI. And first, it's our first practice as of now, that brings you products and services that are rooted in AI and machine learning that bring these benefits to your business. But secondly, that doesn't mean, of course, that you should be dependent on those companies that have this as a mantra. It is the educational piece, and I know that we'll talk more about that. Google feels that this is incredibly important, so much so that we gave $1 billion to be used by nonprofits over the next 5 years to bring AI capabilities to small businesses around the world. So those are the three trends. And what would my personal take after a fantastic first year here in Singapore, where I every day continue to be impressed, not only about what this country has accomplished, but where it's headed as well. These are a lot of big questions that we have in front of us, but do passionately feel that Singapore is strongly positioned to move forward, and for a number of reasons. It's an educated population. We have a high-quality digital infrastructure here in Singapore, and it's affordable. We have a forward-looking government. We have forums just like this with SkillsFuture, an open dialogue, and it's strategically positioned from a geographic perspective. If I were to be so bold to make a what could we do a little bit more of here in Singapore, I would say act with a bit more velocity. And with the mindset of how historically with so many sectors in Singapore thought globally, to also with our technology and digital, to think globally as well. To think beyond Singapore, to think even beyond the region. So after my thoughts, how is Google thinking about these things? And I can do these 5 quite quickly, but at the top of the list, and most important, I would argue, is a mission that matters. Google's mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful for everyone, not just for a few, but for everyone. And we view technology as being able to help us meet our mission. And it's the same mission we've had for the 19 years as a company. So it's not about, with technology, changing your mission as a business. It's about how do you use technology to help you achieve your mission even more greatly than before. The second is to focus on the user, and all else will follow. This is also just like our mission has been in place since Google was founded by Larry and Sergey. And we have a couple of potentially famous examples out there of how we didn't know how search was going to make money. We just knew that users of the internet needed better search. And when we purchased YouTube, we didn't know how YouTube was going to make money. But what I would argue is it goes well beyond the business platform, because we're all not in a luxurious position of saying, how are we going to make money? We'll just put that to the side. It's about thinking about where your customers are. And the bottom line is they are using technology. They are digitally connected. Therefore, we as businesses need to be where the customer is. If we think about not just from an acquisition standpoint with Google, we used to connect, and still do to a large degree, users when they search to 10 blue links. That became a friction point for many people. So how do we make that process even easier? We try and connect our users now not to 10 websites just as an option to go and review all those 10, but how do we connect them to the answer more quickly? And then, I didn't move that. Is open versus closed systems is hugely important. Look for ideas everywhere. They can come from anyone in the organization. We have 20% projects at Google. In fact, the MRT and local bus system and maps was developed by 2 Singaporean engineers who took their 20% time to develop for Singapore. And lastly, think 10x. Don't think incrementally, but how can you be bold with what you do and what you do with technology? And in closing, if I think about this back to everything I've learned about this great country, is I would argue that some of these same things that Google is thinking about is what the founders of Singapore were thinking about. They weren't thinking incrementally, they were thinking 10x. And the people in Singapore weren't thinking, how will I change from a fishing village to, or I'm going to resist the change of becoming one of the greatest global shipping centers, but to embrace it and to think about what change can bring. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davies. Now, our third speaker, Mr. Lee Chui Siang, President from Samsung Electronics Singapore, will give us a preview on the future workplace and how companies will need to invest in their employees and innovation to ensure sustainable growth. Let's put our hands together to welcome Mr. Lee.
Good morning. I'm sure by now all of us here believe that disruption is hitting us in our individual life, in our businesses, but the challenge is we are living in a world whereby there's a lot of other priorities, especially for businesses. I'm not sure about your business, even for myself, managing the Samsung Electronics business in Singapore, I'm faced with a short-term sales pressure. I'm faced with a challenge to manage my cost. And sometimes it's not so easy to start, even if I want to start doing something to prepare our organization better for the future. And maybe some of you might think that all this AI and all this technology shift is not going to be relevant for SMEs. So I'm going to share 4 examples just from Samsung, 4 stories, and hopefully that will be some reference on how Samsung as a company is preparing for the future. The first one is that the importance of investing in innovation and R&D. Many people know Samsung Electronics as a company that we sell TV, mobile phone, home appliances, etc., etc. But the reality is that 80 years ago, Samsung was only a trading company dealing with the basic necessity like sugar, rice, and grocery item. But in a span of 80 years, the company has transformed into a large company, a fairly large company. Today, we spend about 40 million on R&D on a daily basis. So every day, $40 million is burned in R&D. And every year, we spend close to 15 billion US dollar just on R&D. We hold a lot of patents in the world, largely in the semiconductor, display, and wireless and telecommunication arena. And not only that, recently, actually only in the past 10 to 15 years, that the company started to invest in marketing. It has very much been an engineering-based and manufacturing company. But in the latest ranking, we are ranked number 6 in terms of global brand value. Now, the key message and the key point that I want to stress and share with you guys today is the fact about incremental innovation. Samsung we did not have a luxury of a huge innovation, but this company get to where it is today by working very hard, by making all these small little incremental innovation on a daily basis. We don't have a big discovery like what Microsoft, Bill Gates did, or even Google did, coming out with a great product and services that captures the whole world. But it is a lot of small incremental innovation. So So I think innovation is not just for a large company, but for small companies as well. The second thing that has impacted us as a company is in the area of marketing, changing the way we do marketing. And it has changed so much over the last few years. Disruption in marketing, especially because of social media like Facebook, Google. The marketing has changed from more of an art to a science today. And the people that we recruit in marketing has also changed. And we are open to hiring people who are a lot more analytical, engineering background or mathematical background in marketing role. So there's a huge effort going on in Samsung to retrain our staff in marketing, because what we learn, or what the marketing people that we hired maybe 20 years ago or 10 years ago, the skill set are almost redundant. There's still some part of it, but a lot of the whole marketing investment has shifted almost completely. Now, the third example that I'm going to share with you, it's how this company like Samsung uses AI. We talked a lot about AI. We are wondering, maybe some people are wondering, so what is AI? One application that is happening right now within our company, it's using AI in supply chain management. For our business, technology business is very similar to sashimi business. The price of technology is only one direction, down. A smartphone that we produce today in 6 months' time, if we keep the stock for more than 3 months, the price is going to go down. Just like sashimi, you have to keep your sashimi fresh, meaning that the supply chain is very important. We cannot have too much, we cannot carry too much stocks, because the price is just going to go down every month. And because of that, we as a company spend a lot of time, a huge amount of time, not just the people in the supply chain, but in the entire sales and marketing organization in doing forecasting on a daily and a weekly basis. So, and we have a lot of argument within an organization that the robot is not going to do forecasting better than machine. But however, this has been going on for the last 3 years. Even 3 years ago, personally, I don't believe that AI can do a better forecasting, because there's so much information into it. You're going to do promotion, there'll be unexpected events that's going to happen. But after seeing, right now, this whole AI system is running in parallel with our human forecasting, and I'm proud to share that the machine now is coming very, very close to the human forecasting accuracy, and it's going to improve itself continuously. Now, the last part of an example of how Samsung is preparing ourselves for the future, and this is nothing new, is champion of the mobile-first platform. And there is a high level, super high level of adoption. Well, that goes without saying, right? We produce mobile phone. Of course, we get all our staff to use mobile phone for everything in their work. So in Samsung, there's a super high level of adoption for mobile as a work device, not just as a phone, but we do almost everything with our mobile. I just survive with my mobile phone on my work. But the problem with that is security threat, especially for technology company, whereby there's a lot of sensitive information. And one of the side benefit of that is that because of that, we as a company has developed two particular technology. One is the Samsung Knox platform, and the other one is the Samsung DeX to help propel the mobile workforce in the future. We don't know whether we need laptops or computers in the future. Even as we are speaking, one of a very, very, very large bank in US has moved into Samsung DeX and replacing all their computers with just mobile phone and a monitor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Now, our fourth and last speaker is Mr. Ng Cherpong, Chief Executive from SkillsFuture Singapore. Now, he'll be sharing on how SkillsFuture Singapore can help companies evolve and tap on opportunities in the new digital environment. Let's put our hands together for Mr. Ng.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Well, I'll share some good news first. The good news is I'm quite mindful of the time, so I'll try to keep my opening remarks short so that we leave enough time later on for the panel discussion, which I'm really looking forward to. Right. Let me just share some brief observations to hopefully facilitate some of the discussions later on. I think you've heard, I think the previous panel speakers talk about, I think, how the world of work is changing. And I think there are a few broad trends. I think quite clearly a lot of the changes are being driven by technology, but I think there are some things that are quite different from past industrial revolutions. I think the first observation is really that this time round, the change is much more broad-based. It affects not just particular sector, right? When you think about, say, the first industrial revolution, you think about it just affecting the textile industry. But really, this time around, it's very broad-based. It cuts across both economic as well as non-economic sectors. I think the second observation would be that the changes are also very multi-layered. They're driven by different digital technologies, which again, the past panel speakers talk about, AI, robotics, but it's also driven by innovations in business models. And I think the combination of these two means that the changes are extremely complex and the future of work then becomes much more uncertain. Again, I think this is, when you think about the past industrial revolutions, this is a big change. I think that in Singapore, I think companies in Singapore face one added challenge, and that's the challenge of now being at the frontier of an advanced economy. We now do not have models to copy from or replicate, and we really need to find the breakthroughs on our own. And what this means is that we need to invest in research. We need to think about translating innovation into enterprises. And the nature of such endeavor means that there are risks, there are uncertainties. So I think overall, you've heard, again, the past panel speakers talk about this. It means that it is a much more unpredictable world of work, in which job roles are likely to change quite dramatically. Work arrangements as well may be significantly restructured, and I think we can talk more about that maybe later on in the panel discussion. I think what this means, though, is that at the enterprise level, I think most companies in Singapore, certainly, especially the progressive ones, whether large or small companies, recognize the urgent need to transform. And there are different stages of this transformation journey. But I think most companies will also share that when they think about the transformation this time, it is not likely to be a one-off step change, especially if they have a longer time horizon beyond the next 2-3 years. But rather, when they think about the change, it's likely to be a series of changes, almost continuous change, given the fluidity, given the volatility in the external environment. So I think it will change how companies think about talent and their talent and skill strategy, particularly where they're positioned in what I call the build-buy spectrum. Right. And I think this applies particularly for companies who are at the leading edge of industry development. When you think about areas like AI, like robotics, like cybersecurity, even if companies are prepared to pay a premium and poach talent, they can't find it because globally there's a big shortage of such talent. So it means that if they were relying solely on a buy strategy, on talent and skills, they will not be able to compete effectively. That means they need to shift. And at the same time, because of the continuous changes that are required at workplaces, companies will require some capacity to reskill and upskill their existing workforce on an ongoing basis, not just a one-off basis, because the changes are happening all the time. And so they need to be able to send workers for external training, figure out what the training roadmaps look like, but also build some in-house capability to enable staff to learn on the job. And I think both these factors, where they need to shift with regards to how they think about talent acquisition, as well as the need to build in-house capacity to drive reskilling and upskilling, will lead them to move more towards building skills. And the building of skills will need to be premised on some ability to recognize and reward skills, as well as stronger HR capabilities. So this is what happens at the firm level. I think at the job level as well, clearly, again, as you have heard, the nature of the work activities will change with technology. We will need to learn how to work with technology, not to try to outcompete with robots outcompete AI, etc., because we will not be able to do that. And it's quite likely that jobs of the future, which is a question that often comes out, are likely to involve one or more of these three T's that are highlighted here. So high-touch jobs, quite intuitive. I think Indra talked about it. Relational skills, empathy. These are skills that robots will not be able to replicate. So if you think about a five-star hotel, I don't think it's conceivable that a five-star hotel will be completely operated without human beings. Likewise, for high-tech, which is individuals working with technology, figuring out how to tap on technology to make their work more effective. And likewise, for high trust, when you think about, say, professional services, critical functions like medical doctors, it's quite unlikely that we will be so comfortable with technology, we say, well, please treat me on the basis of a medical diagnosis driven entirely by AI. You probably will still require a medical doctor to sign off, to look through the diagnosis, agree with it, and sign off of it before operating on you. So I think jobs in these three areas, or one of these three areas, will be quite safe, and those are, I think, areas, particularly when we think about teenagers, how to give them advice. Usually I would share with them this, that actually one of these three T's will probably be the way to go. Indra has put me in a spot because he said that when he showed the chart to say public policy is lagging, and I want to demonstrate that actually in Singapore, we are the exception rather than the norm. We try to be, at least. Right. And I think you can see quite clearly that there's a lot of effort that's been put in to try to help and support companies in this transformation journey. I think many of you would have heard about the 23 industry transformation maps that have been developed in partnership. It's a collective effort between the lead government agencies, the trade association chambers, the key employers in the sector, as well as the unions, coming together to map out how each of these 23 industries are likely to transform, are likely to be disrupted over the next few years. One key component of each of the ITMs is the skills framework, and that's where SkillsFuture Singapore comes in. What we do is taking reference from how the industry is likely to transform to articulate the job roles in that particular industry, how that's likely to evolve, in particular focusing on the skills that are required for the different job roles in this sector. And I think we then map it to training programs that help individuals acquire these skills. So that's what we do. And we hope that it will be a useful resource for employers who are thinking about transformation so that they can make some reference to the skills framework as they undergo their individual transformation. At the same time, on the supply side, on training, we have created two broad clusters of training programs to help companies manage this transformation. One is what we've termed the SkillsFuture series. So in essence, these focus on emerging and critical skills across 8 different categories, covering things like data analytics, AI, robotics, etc., to help companies make that transformation, as well as a second cluster, which we call SkillsFuture for digital workplaces. So this focuses really on basic digital skills, and it's relevant particularly for companies undergoing digital transformation and where the workforce is perhaps not as digitally confident. So these are sort of resources that are provided for companies as they undergo transformation. At the same time, on workplace learning capabilities, our institutes of higher learning, our polytechnics, universities, have been working quite hard to roll out what we call work-learn programs. And these are offered at different levels. So there are some at the university level called work-study degree program. There are poly level ones, which are called Earn and Learn programs, as well as post-ITE programs, which are known as Work-Learn Technical Diplomas. But what these different programs enable employers to do is really to tap on them, not just to find a way to bring on board and induct fresh graduates into the workplaces, but also by undergoing these programs, it helps employers build up some capacity to train people on the job at workplaces, which will help upskill the existing workforce. So I would end, I will not go through all the other slides, but I will end with this one, just by emphasizing that what we do need, I think, in the future of work is we do need, I believe, a robust, vibrant skills ecosystem. But this is a skills ecosystem that everyone has a part to play. Government can come in, identify some of the gaps, help pool individuals together, provide some resourcing and support for companies to make the transformation. But at the end of the day, I think companies must be committed to shifting, to focusing a lot more on building skills, recognizing skills at workplaces. And likewise, I think individuals must take ownership, personal ownership of charting out their training and development pathway. Thank you very much.